What we're going to do now is tackle a curvy, we'll call it a curvilinear kind of design. So it won't be total circles because that often isn't really practical, and we'll see some areas where that is the case. Our goal on this round is to just see how a curving flow might be integrated into this plan. And what I'm going to do is also add some more lawn areas into this in case you were kind of leaning towards a little bit less hard surfacing like in the last plan. So we'll show a variety of things in this particular example. So first of all, we'll look at the front garden, and what I'll do is start to lay out some circles that encompass the area of hard surfacing that we already had. What you're going to find is when you do curves, it does change how the design really works. So if I were to do a large curved landing, for example, what you might find is that you have some steps going down in towards the cedar bushes. So what I would do is to maintain a bit of a straight line in those two areas and then make my curve kind of work into those. So that's how a landing would show up in this case. And we'll just erase a couple of spots on here. And what I'm looking for is to encompass the whole area of the sitting space. And you are going to notice that if you could bring the chairs up to a straight line, all of a sudden you have a little extra room in behind those chairs in order to leave enough room for the chairs and still maintain your curve. And you can see I've brought it out into where that lawn swing might be. So I might pull that lawn swing in just a little bit so that it's fully on the main curve of this patio. And then I'll look at a trajectory of pathway coming down to the street. And I might just do a little flow like this and see how that might turn into a walkway. So what I do is draw the trajectory of the pathway first, and then I widen it out with a couple of extra lines so I get the width that I want and still following the curve that I want. And one of the tricks I will use is to continue the line across the sidewalk. So I'm not starting here, it's actually over a little bit where it needs to be to follow your eye. And I might curve it, kind of flare it out on the other side here. So visually it has a nice connection. You'll find that erasing on the trace paper can be a bit challenging, but it's really just a rough copy. So we'll just ignore the smeary bits that show up, and then I'll erase the line that goes across the sidewalk. So you can see visually it has a very nice flow to it, and it people won't quite understand what you did, but it looks a little more professional. So here we are, and we've made a nice simple lawn shape, or patio shape rather, and now I'm going to add some lawn shape. And what I would do in this case is probably decide to create a pocket of plants right here. And I might do something like this. And again, I'm going to go across the walkway with my shape and then pull it in towards this lilac over here. So in this case, I'm keeping a lot more lawn across the front. And over near these garden boxes, I'm going to do a curve from there out and around that Mugo pine. And I'll incorporate the rain barrel and the cedar. I might move that rain barrel over a little bit and just allow the lawn to flow around here. And jumping across, I could allow some lawn to come right up to this point, and I might shrink this planting area back, or I would just come around the edge of the pond. So what I'm looking to create here is a grass pathway. And you can see I just kind of map it out a little bit so that these two curves are a certain distance apart and match the same curve. And then from there I'll bring this one out and around. So that's how it would look to have a bit more lawn showing up. And I'm just going to color that in so that you can see how that is showing up. So right here, I'm going to turn this curve. So going around here with a bit of the green color will give us a nice sense of where the lawn is showing up. And of course there's lawn across the boulevard area. So I always color the lawn in there, because if you don't, it gives you a distorted sense of how much lawn is actually there. If you only draw your plan to the sidewalk, it looks like a small amount of lawn, but as soon as you add the sidewalk and the boulevard grass, then you can have a sense of the proportion of lawn area versus other items that you have. And you will find it does change things quite a bit how you see it. So I always draw right to the street, and this is the main reason. Now I'd like to leave that for a moment and show you a picture of this landing coming onto a patio. Would be very similar to what I have on this picture. So landing coming out from the door. Often landings are very small right here. So in this case, it's enlarged quite a bit. And as I mentioned, you wouldn't necessarily want to have a huge amount of curved stairs going right to the wall over here, because some of those stairs will actually go down into planting areas, which doesn't make a lot of sense. You can see that I've put some straighter pieces on here to tie in the planting areas, and that makes a little bit more sense. Coming down here, the flow goes onto the lawn and to the patio furniture area. And you can't quite see it in this picture, but there's a barbecue tucked in over here as well behind the furniture. That is essentially what we've got on the drawing that we did, except there's a solid pathway coming off of here now. So hopefully that makes sense. And now we'll jump into the back and see what's happening here. So if I were to set some priorities here, I might say that this piece of patio would be my outdoor living space. And this one is secondary, where the fire pit is. I could technically change this patio into grass and still have my fire pit sitting in the middle of it. And it would have a more woodsy character again, which is something that we were after. So feel free to play with the idea of maybe this becomes lawn and this becomes your main patio, or maybe this becomes a garden space with extra production area. And this whole design process allows you to play with things on paper so that you're not getting stuck in one direction thinking you have to have a patio. This is a really nice opportunity to play with options. So let's look at how we get over to this doorway. And threshold to threshold, I'm drawing a little line here. Here would be an example of, does it even make sense to have a curve in the patio here where it meets the driveway in the outside garden box? So I would be inclined to leave this corner in here so that I could line up the countertop, the pizza oven, the barbecue, and still have that box outside. Hot tubs, unless you're going with the round hot tub, we're going to leave this as a rectangle too. And these two garden boxes, I would likely leave as rectangles. Here is a spot where in between two rectangles you can sometimes do a little bit of a curve. And like I did in the front, I'm going to widen out this line that I created in order, so I might end this one right here because it goes onto patio space. But this side I could bring right over to here, and going at it from this landing now, I could tie it into the hot tub corner like this. So this stays as angles, but the essence of the garden starts to feel a lot more curvy. Now I'm going to mark in that lilac tree, and here's the shed, and those trees and fruit bushes are still here. And what I will do is to see how can I maximize the amount of lawn in this area. And I'm still liking my table here, so I'm going to play with the curve. Can I bring with a curve into here and over, and now I'm looking at access through here. Maybe I can make a curve in here, and these trees and bushes could be part of a little bed system that wraps around the shed, and my shed door might be here. So you can see that that hammock would still work, but we've left a grass pathway coming through here. So all of this leaving of grass in between will definitely give you a different character to the space. Now if I were to continue on and see how does this connect to the dog run, for example, and our hugel over here, we can do a bit of a bed right here. It's nice to have some plants around this corner, and leave this lawn here. And same around this side. We could go from the hot tub just to incorporate this one bush here. Here's our rain barrel, and we might just leave grass across the front of all of these things. We might still plant something in between the two composters, and just leave this grass all the way through here, and leave our box sitting here and do a little bit of straight grass. So this is why I call it curvilinear. There are going to be places that it just makes a lot more sense to keep it straight. So I'll just lightly color this in. It's a little bumpy because of all our things underneath. This just reminds me that it's all lawn. So what we'll do now is to take this trace paper off of the base plan, and we'll just play with cleaning it up a little bit using a circle template that I'd like to show you. Now we get to clean up some of our curved lines. You can see that I have things sketched in, and I used a little bit of green to emphasize where the lawn areas were. So we remember that there's a pond here, and there's plants here, and garden boxes here. So the idea now is to see if we can clean up the lines a little bit. And one of my favorite tools is a circle template. So you can buy them. They're kind of a plastic material. And the way they work is that I always sketch in the rough circle. I have a lot of practice drawing circles, so often I'll be fairly close with my circle shape that I've already drawn. However, when you're new at it, it can be a little bit difficult. So what I do is use that to create a much more solid, tidy circle. Now you can buy these at office supply stores, office or art supplies. But what I'm doing in your package is including a photocopy of one And the way you would use this is to slide it underneath of your plan. Now, if you were going to do a nice curve for your steps, you might just kind of line it up and you'll hand draw where that curve is and hand draw the next line up. And you will see, again, this is kind of hard to erase on this trace paper, but you'll get the idea that just doing that, you can create a nicer curved shape than what you already drew. So I just play with which one is going to fit the shape that I've already drawn. And so I can even go back to this one and figure out which one it was I used. And I could just continue this line out here. And then what I can do is find the smaller radius that will fit right there and just draw around. Occasionally you'll need to use two different curves to get it to flow. There's a tighter curve that I use to bring it into the existing patio, and then there's the longer curve that I use to create the sidewalk. Often when you've got one side of the sidewalk laid out, you can just go across and you can see that some of the other curves will be right where you need them. And at some point you can see here my line underneath needed to turn into a different curve to head up here to the front landing. So this will take a little bit of practice to play with, but it's a fun tool, and you'll find that your drawing will look amazingly professional as soon as you start to use something like this. What it does is it almost forces you to not cheat on your curves. They have to be workable or it's just not going to flow very well. So you can see I was visually coming across here with that same curve, and I've marked this spot, and then I'm going to switch my curve to go the other direction, and till I find one that sort of fits, and then I draw that one in. So that's how you use the circle maker. So you should never have any curves that are just kind of what I call wishy-washy. They should either curve one way or the other, or be a straight line. So it shouldn't be just kind of like a, kind of some kind of shape that isn't really strong. I like to see really strong curves happening. And you will find between one curve coming this way and one curve coming at it from the other way, there's going to be an inside curve that will just bump up against those two. And the trick is to, again, have it to be kind of a smooth shape that looks right with the other side of the sidewalk. You don't necessarily want to have one that's really wiggly coming into here, whereas the other side is much smoother. So of course it is a lot easier if you can get a circle template, but my philosophy is, can you do this without buying any extra equipment that you won't need later on? And using this trace paper really makes this whole thing work quite well. So you can see I was close in some places and not as close in others. It does keep you quite honest. So looking at this flower bed shape right here, I would do the larger shape first, and I might even play with it by hand before So I get it visually kind of close, and then bring my circle template in there. And there's going to be a point right about here where it either has to keep going and you have to turn your circle template to continue the line. And then use the opposite side of the template to find a radius that works here. And then you'll just erase the lines that were sketchy. And all of a sudden you have a nice looking layout. And at this point, you would go in with your lawn color. And outline your curved areas with a little extra pressure on your art stick. And then bring it up to here. Yeah, I kind of just use a little extra pressure when I'm outlining the curves. And there you have a nice curved front garden. I will usually color things as I go along like this, because it's so much easier to visualize when you can see the balance of lawn versus other elements. And it also makes it easier to lay out your plantings at this point. You can definitely see this is it for planting space, and you can easily play with what's going to go into this small area. And it doesn't feel so overwhelming. It's like, oh, I have to choose like 1, 2, 3, 4 types of plants, and I can label that. So moving into the back space, you can do exactly the same thing and lay out some curves. Again, I usually tackle the biggest curves first. You can see I'm cheating a little bit right here to pull it into that doorway. I'm going to make sure this side has a good curve. And then I'm going to use the next curve is this one going over here into the planter. Cleaning up the curves, cleaning up that sidewalk. And then I just need to adjust this one a little bit to bring it down into that front landing. And I might use one of these curves to accent that step. If you make it too flat, it becomes almost wishy-washy again. So make sure that there's an obvious curve if you're going to do a curve. Yeah, so we're going to do our planter here and do our patio color in. I'm a big fan of making it visually easier as you're designing things. Whatever isn't colored, it has yet to have some information added to it. So it as soon as you're done creating one thing, it almost becomes quite obvious what the next step is, which is really helpful. So as I'm doing this bed, I'm going to do that side and then the other end and pull that curve into here. So all I need to do is to find a nice radius for this. So I wouldn't go in here with a really sharp curve because I'm thinking, how am I going to cut the grass in here? And if it's too tight, as you know, you have to get out the string trimmer. And if it's too shallow, it doesn't look right either. So there's going to be a magic spot that feels really good. So once again, we have the odd little curve to fill in. And this is our square planter. You could also go curved planters, but usually for garden boxes, it's actually, you get a bit more soil space if you leave it square as opposed to trying to do a curve right here. It can look quite nice. You can do a half curve. That would work as well. You can see you are losing a little bit of growing space if you do that. So once you have your major curves tied in, then we go in again and just add in that little bit of extra color on the trace paper, and you'll start to get a nice sense of how much lawn there is now, and is it feeling like enough. So this is such a great way to set your priorities and get a feeling of, am I crowding my garden too much, or is there really enough room for everything that I'd like to have? So you might add a little color around the boxes. And you can go ahead and, on this copy, we probably wouldn't add all the things back in because we are going to start to transfer some items to a third concept, of course. You're going to do the straight concept, the curvy concept, and then maybe concept number 3 will be a little bit of a combination between things that are starting to feel more like a priority for you. And then at that point, you'll translate it onto your base plan.